Hello and welcome to Pathways, where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. Now, while the practice of self-care is most often touted for its profound mind, body, and spiritual benefits, today's guest shows how self-care can also be a powerful tool for spurring transformative collective action. Perhaps finding true health and peace is not a solo endeavor. Our guest today is Shelly Tygielski, author of the new book, Sit Down to Rise Up: How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. Shelly is the founder of the global grassroots mutual aid organization, Pandemic of Love. She's also co-founder of Partners in Kind, a purpose and production equity fund that invests in social impact and entertainment projects. Her work as a self-care activist, community organizer, and mindfulness teacher has been featured by over 100 media outlets, including CNN Heroes, The Kelly Clarkson Show, CBS This Morning, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. What an illustrious list. A trauma-informed mindfulness teacher and former Garrison Institute fellow, she's been called one of the 12 most powerful women in the mindfulness movement by mindful.org. Shelley's currently working on her doctorate degree at the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. Well, hello, Shelley, and welcome to the Pathways Show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Now, I'm going to start out with Chelsea Handler's description of your book, which is in the preface to your book. And she says, this book is a blueprint for personal growth and effective societal contribution. It's a roadmap to compassion and radical self-care, what it means to be part of a community, and what it means to give and receive love. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, um, I certainly never thought, to be honest with you, that I would write a book. I think there's a lot of people who think, wow, I have so much to say, and I want to, um, you know, make sure that I codify it in some way. I was actually approached by Mindful Magazine at the time, which was I'm not sure if it's still a print publication or not, but Mindful Magazine approached me about doing a series um, called Self Care for Activists, or Self Care in Politically Charged Times, I think is what they ended up calling it. And this was, close to the 2020 elections. And I took the time to write a series for the magazine and got a really incredible response to that series. And that really served as a cornerstone. And I thought, I wonder if I can sort of, build upon this body of work now, these six articles that I originally wrote, and and make it so that it's not just for politically charged times, although certainly we are living in politically charged times still, but actually, make it so that it is relevant for all times.
Okay.
Because even, if somebody's going through a difficult time in their own life, and certainly we all do at key points in our life, how do we really understand how to take care of ourselves, take care of others, build community, weave safety nets. And yes, also to lean on something that Audre Lorde, once said, use self-care as an act even of resistance when needed.
Yeah, I think it's a you have developed a wonderful intersection between self-care and community, and this book totally speaks to that and so much more. And there's so much value and different kinds of value in this book. I'm afraid to ask who it was written for because it's like I think everybody should read it. So anyway, thank you for that. Now you write, quote, I am the type of person who tends to thrive in spaces where others might shrink, cave, or fall apart. And the stories you
Mm-hmm.
tell in the book really illustrate that so well. You say, I need a certain measure of chaos surrounding me in order to take the initiative. Okay. Well, not everyone is like that. And how relevant is your advice for people who are not as initiatory as yourself?
Yeah. I think my advice is still incredibly relevant because the point of community and really the way that I define communal care is really steeped in the tenets of mutual aid, right? And the premise of mutual aid is that a community requires all sorts of people, uh, that it inherently believes and is built upon the notion that every single human being on this planet has something that they can contribute, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And every single person on this planet has something they need, also regardless of their socioeconomic status. And so the idea is that we can build community using the strength of different people, using
Right,
what they can contribute, right? Some people may have money, but some people may have time poverty. Some people may have extra time. Some people may have, uh, space and energy to be able to do something or a very unique or specific skill. And so the idea is that when we think about self care, and this is why it's incredibly important to kind of make sure that we just first like return to the roots of like the terminology of self care. Many people think of self care as an individualistic pursuit. And I understand why, because the word self is in there, right? And
right,
so
right,
they think it's the me, the I. And in fact, what the book really aims to do is, yes, carry you through that journey of me, because we have to be able to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first so that we can help others, but really carry us through from the me to the we to the us.
right,
And the notion that the reason that we are putting that oxygen mask on first on ourselves, the reason that we invest in the individualistic component of self care is so that we can show up for others, and so that in turn they can show up for us and we can build those safety nets that make it then in turn much easier to administer self care.
right. And one of the things that derails people in our society is this obsession with the pursuit of success, the pursuit of happiness. And you have a lot to say about that. And you quote Viktor Frankl, who
Mm-hmm.
wrote The Search for Meaning. What an incredible book. Um,
Yeah.
and he says, don't aim at success. The more you aim at it, the more you're going to miss it because it cannot be pursued like happiness. It must ensue. And if it only does as an unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. And then you go on to write, the odds of reaching a level of relative happiness and fulfillment favor those with a defined purpose and meaning. That's very profound. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I think that, and I had to learn this the hard way. And I think there's so many books and really wonderful books and people who speak about their journeys, which are not dissimilar to mine in the sense that, like, when we're chasing a goal, when we're climbing this proverbial mountain and we reach the mountaintop eventually, if we do, we come up empty. Like, it's if the only pursuit of our life is to, reach that mountaintop, that is actually we're setting ourselves up for failure. If the goal is really steep, if our kind of journey instead is steeped, and I talk a lot about this in the book, in intention, centering our
Right,
life around intentions instead of goals, it completely reframes things in a way that really help to connect us to the realization of those intentions in a very, tangible way. So, for example, when we talk about these abstract terms that I think have been hijacked and co-opted, and certainly, capitalism has taken them and created an industry out of terms like happiness and peace and balance and harmony and all these things that you see printed on shirts now and little stones and coffee mugs and whatever, you know, those terms, like, if they evade people, they're confusing to so many people because we see them as goals.
Right.
versus how do I center every single thing that I do in my life around this particular intention.
Okay, so let's
And
talk
that
about
really
it. Yeah.
creates the purpose.
Intention is an interesting term, and to substitute intention for goals is an interesting concept because intentions seem kind of dicey to me. You know, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
So tell us about what do you mean by intention? Is that a sense of purpose, expressing
Yeah.
itself? Okay.
Yeah, but I think it forces us to get a little bit more specific. So one of the practices that I talk about in the book is something that I call if only for today. And this is a practice that I've been using for many, many years, where when I wake up every morning, I think to myself, what is the intention? What
Right.
is the this intention word, right? As abstract as it may be, that I want to infuse in my life today,
Right.
just for today, right? And it could be the same word. You can replace day with year if you're a resolution type of person, that's fine. But if we really kind of sit and think about, like, if I showed up more with this type of quality, right? And so we can substitute the word intention for like quality of being, right?
Okay.
If I showed up more and I was more patient, if I showed up and I was kinder, if I had more compassion today,
Mhm.
what would that change in the way that I'm showing up in the world?
So you do this practice every morning, and I was going to bring that up because I think it's a great sadhana, as they say in the yogic universe,
Mm-hmm.
spiritual practice to start the day with. I'm just curious, does your intention change that the intention you want to focus on change every day or very much?
It's interesting. It's so funny. Like it the ebb and flows of life, sort of, especially if you're not meditating or ruminating on specifically what that word is, and you just let it kind of pop into your head or like wash over you, in a brief moment, and you don't like question it. Um, there have been times where I had the same word for weeks and weeks and months.
Right,
So when I was going through a really challenging time, um, and still working very much in the corporate world, and having panic attacks and really questioning like the worth of my life after reaching a goal, right? Of like running a company and being successful financially and all of these, getting all these accolades and recognitions, etc. But yet being the most miserable I'd ever been in my life, I started to ask myself this question. And the intention that kept coming up for me during that time was community and connection,
right,
community and connection, so they would alternate. And so when I started to think about, okay, well, how do I center my life around the need for community or to commune with people? How do I build community? What do I need to do on a daily basis in order to be able to center the way that I'm operating in this world that is very individualistic and driven by capitalism, and like this fiduciary responsibility that I have to the company that I'm working for at the time? What does that look like? And for me, what that looked like was, I'm going to first and foremost connect with myself. I'm going to commit to meditating, every Sunday morning, in a peaceful way. At the time, I was living in South Florida at the beach, and then expand that terminology of community and connection to inviting other people to join me.
right. It's an incredible story. The way that you have manifested community in your life, but also for the sake of the community, the collective itself, is really some really great stories in the book that I really enjoyed a lot. And you stress the importance and power of showing up, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the title of the book. And so why is showing up so difficult for many people?
I think we succumb to the voices in our heads. We think that we don't have the right tools, or we don't have the right pedigree, or we don't have the right um, uh, access, or ability to show up. We question ourselves. We question the ability to just simply love and be
Hmm.
kind. And those are the two things that are the most inherent to just being human, right? Having
Right, right.
empathy. And
Yeah,
so if we could just believe and trust in this, um, you know, beautiful gift that we have as human beings, the gift of being able to be empathetic and
right.
to connect with people on that level, and let that just be our guide, I think it becomes a lot more easier to, more easy to show up.
I want to talk about mutual aid and the community of care, but first, it seems to me one of the obstacles for a lot of people is their um, resistance to asking for help. And you have a lot to say about that. Um, and you say asking for help requires us to be resourceful, a key element of emotional strength. And I thought that was a really, really great concept that not very many people have thought of. Um, so asking for help is pretty important, right? And that blocks people because they think, oh, I'm going to be part of a community so I can contribute, but they have needs. Everybody has needs, and
Right.
so you know, why is asking for help so important? What would you say?
I think that asking for help, um, if we want to think about it it's interesting to think about it and frame it in a way of like, how do I invite other people to ask for help too?
Right, right,
When we normalize asking for help, when we're able to be brave enough and courageous enough to say, these are my needs, I'm willing to be vulnerable and express that I need help with these things,
right.
it actually
Hmm.
signals to others in community that it's okay and it's a safe space to be able to do the same. I think that, again, we go back to this individualistic society that we have grown into. Um, and the reality is that when we think about, you know, every single element of and every single thing that we have accomplished or that we do on a daily basis or that we consume on a daily basis, it's even if we're doing that thing alone, there's still like hundreds, if not thousands of people, and generationally thousands of people who have contributed to that thing that we're eating or that we're driving or that when we turn a light bulb on or when we're reading a book, which is one of the examples that I use in my writing. And I think that, the idea is that when we are willing to be vulnerable enough and ask for help, we're also saying, hey, you know what? I recognize that I couldn't have gotten here without the help of anybody,
Right.
else. And
Hmm.
I want you to be able to recognize that too.
Now, one of the things that you have been such a leader in is the formalized structure of mutual aid, which is described as a pillar of every formalized community of care. So,
Yeah,
what is mutual aid, and what separates it from conventional charity?
sure. So the terminology that's often used to describe mutual aid is that it's based on solidarity and not charity. And the key difference is that, again, in charity, oftentimes it's a one way kind of it's very transactional and it's a one
Right.
way transaction, right? It's
Hmm.
from a
Hmm.
person, a have to a have not, if you will. There's a
Right.
gap that needs to be filled. Somebody's filling the gap. And there may be a middleman, if you will, here in the United States, obviously a 501(c)(3, a nonprofit organization, et cetera, that kind of
Right.
facilitates that and removes the connection point between the giver and the receiver. Mutual aid is very much about that solidarity piece, which is making people feel seen and heard, holding space with people, being able to create those safe spaces and safety nets. And again, going back to the premise and the notion that every single person in a community has something they need, and every single person has something that they can offer. So, even if I, am financially able to accomplish something or purchase things and I have, sort of my material needs fulfilled, as I mentioned earlier, I may be suffering from time poverty
Yeah.
and I
Right.
may need help from my community to be able to step in and help provide me with, you know, with some space and some time.
Right.
And and so I gave an example in the book of like when I was a single mother and the fact that I was very much, um, both sleep deprived, time deprived, and working really hard to make ends meet. And I had to lean on community and ask for help from friends, people who were acquaintances, not even that I considered them a friend, if you will, at that time, but even acquaintances, to make sure that I had the time to be able to take care of myself,
Right.
and that came in the form of every Wednesday I had a friend that would bring over, a meal so that I didn't have to worry about cooking on
Hmm.
that evening. That saved me time. That
Right.
gave me back some time. Somebody willing to take my son to school a couple of times a week, which gave me time in the morning to be able to, again, administer self care, take care of myself. And so when I was finally above, water, my head was above water and I wasn't feeling like I was overwhelmed and drowning and teetering on burnout, I was able to then plug back into that community and offer what I could offer at that time to other people within that community.
Right. And as you point out in the book, in our society, it's such a rat race, we're always pursuing more, more, more. And in chapter 11 is entitled Enough is a Feast. And I love that. I don't know if you coined that, but that's really good. I also want to quote Lily Tomlin, which you put in your book, where she said, if you're in a rat race and you win, you're still a rat. I think that's hilarious.
She's so great. Yeah, she's
So,
so great.
this
She's
whole
brilliant.
idea about simplifying our life so that instead of like trying to accumulate endlessly and chasing that next hit of dopamine, as you put it, um,
Yeah.
we can sort of like, let go and let things circulate, have a better quality of
Yeah,
life. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
absolutely.
Now, I love what you said. We keep reaching for that next hit of dopamine because we evolved to be anxious creatures who are always striving for more. That is an interesting anthropological insight that I think is very, very profound. And I want to thank you for that. And you point out how, well, here's a question. What is despair and how to resist it? I mean, despair is so tempting these days. It's very easy to say,
Mm.
hey, humanity sucks and the world's going to hell and it's too late. We can't, correct climate catastrophe, etc. So how do we
hmm
resist that? How do we resist despair?
It's so interesting. So, Paul, I don't know if you know this, but I live in Asheville, North Carolina, half the year, and we just
Oh,
went
I
through
didn't know
Hurricane
that.
Helene.
Right.
And so, so many people are still without homes and, living in temporary housing or even tents, believe it or not. Uh, we were without water for 53 days. Many people lost their lives. And I bring this up just like because it's so recent in my memory, but also because, when we think about moments of despair, moments where you feel like, all is lost in those moments, like out of the ashes, really such beauty also. You see the worst of humanity, you see the worst of what we've done to the planet and to Mother Earth, and like how it's, coming back to kind of share just the distress that it's under with us. Um, and but you also, you get to see the best of humanity in those moments as well, because all the helpers, all of the people that um themselves are struggling and going through that same moment with you find their, empathy and tap
Yeah.
into that moment of vulnerability and are able to help and are willing to give you like the shirt off their back in those moments. So that whether you're in like a war zone or whether you're in a place that experienced a natural disaster or, in this country, just thinking about like the mass shooting that just happened yesterday at another school in Wisconsin. And so when you think about like all these moments, um, it's easy to fall into despair. But if
Yeah,
you yourself commit to be, again, showing up and becoming the helper, you will find the other helpers too. It's
great.
they're out there. And that really infuses you with, that hope that, well, wait a minute, actually, you know, there's a lot of beauty still left in the
So
world.
showing up is the solution or is the remedy for despair. Oh,
It is.
we've only got another couple of minutes, and I want to give you a chance to explain how Pandemic of Love works.
Sure. Well, Pandemic of Love is actually it's a grassroots mutual aid organization, which is international. It's in 21 countries with over 300 chapters and thousands of volunteers. And it's basically a way to connect people directly, people who have a need with people who are able to fulfill that need. And the need can be monetary. It could be something like, I need help paying my bill for my utility bill, my car bill, my phone bill, my rent this month. Or it could be, somebody who needs um, help with groceries delivered or a
Right,
lawn
right.
mowed or, anything like that. And so the idea is that, we created this portal, and it obviously was born through via the name Pandemic of Love during the COVID-19 pandemic, on the onset of it, to basically give people an opportunity to transact directly so that there's no middleman or organization involved. In other words, you don't have to donate to an organization, which then takes a fee and then funnels it directly to that person. But rather, it gave an opportunity for direct aid to happen. And more importantly, for connection to happen during a
Yes.
time, especially of disconnection.
I know that people can learn about this from your website, which I'm going to announce in a minute because we are out of time. But I want to close with a quote from your book where you say, from the Talmud, which is a Jewish scripture, when I was
Mm-hmm.
barely 13, this has been a guidepost for my work. Quote, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Wow. That kind of sums it up. That sums up your whole activist uh, philosophy. And thank you so much for being on the show and for being who you are and doing so much. It's unbelievable.
Thank
But I want to
you.
and there's so much more we could explore. The book contains a lot of philosophy that we didn't even touch on, which is really beautifully put about meditation, about, you know, self-care. It's just beautiful. And I want to be sure to tell our listeners about your website, which is www.shellytagilski.com. Now that's all one word, Shelly, Shelly, last name Tygielski.com. And for those who may have tuned into Pathways late today, this is your host, Paul O'Brien, author of Intuitive Intelligence, a book that shares the theme of pathways, which is personal and cultural evolution. Now, don't worry, you can play and or share this interview whenever you want via the internet or as a free podcast, and I'll tell you how in a minute. Today, we've been visiting with Shelly Tygielski, author of Sit Down to Rise Up, How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. I think this is a must-read book. I hope everybody listening to this orders a copy because it's amazing. And I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into Pathways, which is broadcast and streamed on the internet at www.kboo.fm every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. USA Pacific Time. And even better, podcasts of today's show, which you can listen to and forward to others, are available for free at divination.com, divination.com, as well as Paulo's YouTube channel and other free podcast servers. This is Paul O'Brien reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways Radio and podcasts. And thanks again to Shelly Tygielski and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways conversation.